There is a clay tablet, almost 4,000 years old, that most of us will never be allowed to read in full, not because it's locked in a vault somewhere, because the one line that mattered most was scraped off the clay before it ever had the chance to harden, and every translation since has had to work around a hole where an answer used to be. The tablet tells a story about 7 beings the Sumerians called the Watchers, stationed along the path a prayer takes on its way up to the gods. And it tells the story of the one god who tried to warn humanity they existed, and what it cost him to try. To understand this story, you have to understand who Enlil and Enki actually were to the Sumerians, because this whole tablet turns on the disagreement between them. Enlil was the lord of the air of command of the space between earth and heaven that every prayer had to pass through on its way to the gods. He was authority, order, the one who expected the machinery of the world to run exactly as designed, without anyone looking too closely at how it worked. Enki was different. Enki was the lord of the deep waters of craft, of hidden things, and in tablet after tablet, whenever the old texts describe a god who noticed something wrong and tried to fix it, it's Enki's hand on the page. If Enlil built the system, Enki was the one who eventually looked underneath it. What Enki found underneath it, according to this tablet, was a toll booth. The passage describes 7 entities stationed along the ascent a prayer makes, each one assigned to intercept a different kind of desperation. Fear, repetition, a bargain struck under duress, a vow nobody really had a choice in making. Each one takes a small piece before letting the rest continue upward. None of them create anything. None of them answer anything. They only receive, and what they receive, the tablet says plainly they keep. And the tablet claims this wasn't an accident of cosmology. It claims Enlil knew that the toll booth had his approval, quietly, because a system that schemes a little off every prayer before it arrives is a system that never runs short. Before we go any further, I need to pause for a second, because what Enki did about it is the part that gets buried in every translation that makes it out of the specialist journals. The complete list of all 7 watchers, the exact function assigned to each one, and the fragment where Enki's name appears directly beside the line that was later erased. All of it is written out in full in the document linked below. Grab it now, because the next part is where this stops being architecture and starts being a story about betrayal. Now, let's continue. According to the fragments that survive, Enki did not simply notice the 7 gates and move on the way the other gods apparently had for generations. He went looking for the 8th name, the one entity the tablet describes as standing not along the path, but at the very end of it, the one the other 7 ultimately answered to. And he found it. The text is careful here in a way it isn't anywhere else in the passage. It doesn't say Enki fought this 8th being or bargained with it, or even spoke to it directly. It says he wrote its name down in temple clay, where any priest literate enough to read it could learn to recognize what had been quietly feeding off their devotion for longer than anyone could remember. That single act, writing the name down where it could be read, is what the tablet frames as the true crime, not discovering the watchers, not even naming the first 6, which the text does openly and without apparent consequence. Naming the 7th, because a watcher that can be identified can be refused. A prayer sent knowingly around a checkpoint stops feeding whatever sits at that checkpoint, and the tablet suggests this was never supposed to be possible. The 7 gates worked because no one below them knew they were gates at all. They looked, to every worshipper who ever passed through one, like nothing more than the ordinary difficulty of being heard by a god. When Enlil found out, and the tablet is specific that he did find out, not that he suspected, the response wasn't described as anger in the ordinary sense. It's described using the same word Sumerian texts use for a landowner discovering his own steward has been falsifying the accounts. Betrayal by someone with access. Enlil convened the council of the great gods, the tablet says, and laid the matter out plainly. Enki had taken something that belonged to the machinery of heaven and handed the knowledge of it to creatures who were never meant to have it. What happened next is the part where the clay itself turns against the reader, because this is exactly where the erasure sits. The line before it describes the council reaching its decision. The line after it describes the punishment being carried out. The line itself, the one that presumably named what Enki actually gave humanity, or how he gave it, or to whom, is gone, scraped smooth by someone standing over the tablet the same day it was written, before the clay had time to set. We don't know for certain what it said. Under raking light, the tablet shows the faint pressure ghost of a stylus stroke beneath the smoothing, enough to confirm something specific and deliberate was written, and then just as deliberately removed. Not enough to responsibly reconstruct the words. But the shape of what surrounds the gap tells its own story. A scribe willing to name 6 watchers by function, and a 7th by identity, willing to describe an entire covert system of interception running underneath the official religion of his own civilization, stopped short of exactly one sentence. Whatever that sentence held wasn't dangerous the way the rest of the tablet was dangerous. It was dangerous in a different, more immediate way, the kind of dangerous that gets a hand physically reaching for the clay before the ink of intention has even dried. The tablet doesn't leave us with nothing, though. What survives on the other side of the gap is a description of consequence, not of crime, and it's oddly restrained for how severe it turns out to be. Enki is not destroyed. He is not cast out. The tablet says only that from that point forward, his name begins appearing in later texts tangled together with words for rebellion, for forbidden speech, for a warning given where a warning wasn't authorized. He becomes, in the literature that comes after this tablet, a figure associated less with wisdom in the clean, textbook sense, and more with the specific, narrower idea of knowledge that costs something to have. The kind you're not punished for possessing, the kind you're punished for sharing. And there's a pattern worth sitting with here, because it doesn't stay contained to Sumer, a wise figure who sees an arrangement no one else is permitted to see clearly, who hands a piece of that clarity down to people who weren't meant to have it, and who pays a price that outlives the act itself. That shape shows up again and again across cultures that never had contact with each other or with this specific tablet. A fire stolen and given away, punished with an eternity of consequence. A tree, a forbidden knowing, a price paid by everyone who eats from it, not just the one who offered it. Different names, different settings, the same underlying architecture. Someone in a position to see the whole system chooses to tell the people at the bottom of it what it actually costs them, and the telling itself is treated as the offense, not the system it exposes. Whether that repetition means these are broken echoes of one very old memory, or just that every civilization independently arrives at the same anxiety about power and its keepers, is not something this tablet, or any tablet, can settle on its own. What it can tell you, with more confidence than the surrounding mythology usually allows, is what a handful of specialists keep finding when they go back to this specific fragment. A system of 7 interceptors, described in language too precise to be purely poetic, and one erased line sitting exactly where the description of how to see past them should be. The tablet remains catalogued mostly by its dimensions, referenced occasionally in footnotes, otherwise left alone, not from any coordinated silence, but because a fragment this incomplete rarely survives contact with a discipline that prefers certainty. The 7th Watcher's name is gone. What Enki gave humanity in exchange for it is gone too, at least from this particular piece of clay. What's left is 6 functioning gates, one god willing to risk everything to expose a 7th, and a single missing sentence that 4,000 years of scholarship still hasn't managed to put back. None of this happened. There is no tablet naming 7 watchers along the road of prayer, no erased line describing what Enki gave away and what it cost him. Real Sumerian religion in Lil Enki Nippur, the Atrahasis flood epic, this story borrows its bones from, is genuinely rich enough on its own terms to reward real reading, from real translators and real excavation records, without needing an invented tablet to make it worth your time.